Good evening. I'm Al, and I am joined by John, who goes by Bellarmite. That's how he goes on Twitter, and I believe he has a YouTube channel. He'll tell us about that one in a second. And our goal today is to review a video. Um, to review a video of the one and only Jimmy White, and where he goes on a young Protestant's channel. I believe this Protestant is an ex-Catholic. He's from South America, or he could have been born. His parents are certainly ex-Catholics, but and so he had James White, and he kind of has an obsession with Catholicism. His name is Javier Perdomo. He kind of has an obsession with Catholicism. It's like, why? Because if you take a look at all the videos he has on his site, he's like, why so and so became Anglican instead of Catholic, became Baptist instead of Catholic, became Pentecostal. It's kind of like he kind of has an obsession of converting us, which is good. Bring it on, Javier. we're we're ready to dismantle the arguments of James White. Now, I just want to say I have not watched this video. Save a couple minutes. I know John hasn't either, but I watched a few of his other videos, the ones we're not going to reviewing. And Father James here was on this channel. So was the other Paul, and a couple other people I've interacted with are on this channel. So yeah, we got nothing against this guy. And in fact, this guy, you will notice in his bookshelf at the back, he has a whole bunch of fantasy books. He's got The Wheel of Time. He's got the Ryrie Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. Amazing books. And he's also got the books, the Expanse books, I believe. Like, I would love to have this guy on just to talk about fantasy. Javier, if you're listening, if you want to talk about books, just like I do Star Wars books with Father James here. Shout out to Father James. All right, so John, take a minute and introduce yourself. Then we'll get right to this video.
Sounds good. Is my audio working a little better? I just did a quick setting fix to it.
I can hear you perfectly. Perhaps the people in the comments can say if they can hear you, but I can hear you perfectly.
Cool. So I'll get started. So yeah, I've been on the kind of like making Catholic content for about 8 months, I would say, almost a year. I actually grew up in a Reformed Baptist home, so I'm very familiar with James White.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh,
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. I remember when my dad was all into certain things about James White, him getting the Forgotten Trinity book, which I've heard is absolutely terrible, but never read it.
It's not bad. It's one of his better books. He does better when he defends Catholic doctrine. By the way, I just want to show one of his books, The God Who Justifies. In my opinion, it's a solid attempted defense at the doctrine of sola fide. Of course, it falls far short because it's a false doctrine, but I think he put some effort to try to prove it. He's got like paragraphs all in Greek here and stuff. It's like 400 pages. It's long. And I've got about half a dozen other of his books, because back then I thought he was like the big guy you have to go, but now we found out he's a joke. But so I kind of interrupted you there. So continue.
Yeah.
Your father was reading his books.
Yeah, and I actually did wind up reading one of his books, which was legitimately good, and that was the King James Only controversy. Let-
Never
pro-
read that one.
uh, Primarily because he's going after such a simple thing to refute, primarily, but he does a really good job at it. But yeah, I was raised Reformed Baptist. I really started questioning, you know, there were some personal things I was questioning, but I eventually got into Philip Schaff's collection of the Nicene and post-Nicene fathers,
Uh-oh.
um, particularly his one on Chrysostom's homilies and the seven ecumenical councils. And I found myself attracted to both Catholicism and Orthodoxy, but oddly enough, Catholicism, there was something about it. I just felt like it was especially strawmanned in our day, and there was something just a lot more attractive to me about it, a lot more rich to Catholicism. And no, I love the church, and I want to defend it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, because it was started by Christ, unlike whatever church Jimmy White's pretending to be in. But uh, there's a question I was going to ask you. Oh, why do you have the title, the name Bellarmite? Are you a big fan of Saint Robert Bellarmine?
Oh yeah, he I had gotten his work, De Romano Pontifice, particularly books 1 and 2, and that made a
Mm.
huge impression on me going through that, because it really reshaped the way I looked at papal apologetics. Particularly, I feel like so much of apologetics has gotten significantly weaker than back in the 15th, 16th centuries.
I
The
know there's so
Protest.
much good stuff there.
Oh yeah,
And God bless Ryan Grant for translating this stuff.
Oh no, huge respect, and I did see that you got the chance to interview him, which I haven't seen it all the way through, but
Oh, he's
uh,
good. He's
yes,
brilliant guy. He loves the Lord. And he loves the saints and translating their writing. Loves history. And he covers an area of history I don't focus on too much, although I might in the future. Who knows? Like I'm kind of like I focus about 600 to 1300. That's my area of focus. I'm not saying I don't know anything before 600 or after 1300, but I mean that's where I like to read all my primary sources, and I just binge all those sources, including some that I'll probably bring up today. I haven't watched this video. Save a couple minutes. I told you not to watch too much because we're going to go in blind. We're going to go swinging. We're going to go for Jimmy and pray for Javier. Pray that he comes home. Alan, I've been waiting ages for Grant's full translation to be finished by thinking of Master Mila. So I'll just read Bellarmine's full. Okay. I could ask him that if you want, because we're going to do it part 2 and possibly even a part 3. So I could ask that. Either way. Is there anything else you want to say before we get started?
I think that was the primary stuff. I will say that, and we'll probably notice this going into the video. The Protestant apologetics in the 16th century and 17th century were significantly more thorough and more difficult to respond to than apologetics from Protestants today, for the most part. But
Well, I think it's fair to say both sides have gone downhill.
oh no, definitely. Oh man.
Yeah. We can all agree that we're shells of what we were in the time of Bellarmine, DeSales, Liguri, John Fisher, who I can't wait to order his response to Martin Luther that that Grant is publishing. It's going to be out in like a week. Anyway, let's get to the video. Again, this is Javier Perdomo. It sounds Italian, or Perdomo. Here, let's just add him. Let's all right, wait. I'm trying to make him fit the entire screen. Is that it? All right, how does this look?
Looks good to me.
Good enough. We'll do that. All right, Javier Perdomo, Jimmy White, here we go.
When I listen to convert stories, and I've listened to a lot of them, when people leave Roman Catholicism, generally their testimony is of conversion to Christ.
They convert to Christ.
I had never heard the gospel. I had never heard the message of peace. I have come to know Christ as my Savior.
Oh, by the way, John, if you want, just like if you want me to stop at any time, just say so.
Jeff
Cool.
Durbin, I had the incredible opportunity in April of this year to lead his mom, a Roman Catholic, to Christ on her deathbed.
Oh, wow.
Just days before she passed.
Jeff
and she
Durbin.
died not full of fear because she was afraid of purgatory and all the rest of this stuff,
Oh
but
man.
Jeff spent hours with her. and she died in full confidence of forgiveness in Christ and peace with him. But when people go the other direction, what they talk about is conversion to the church.
Okay, and we're going to get to this, but this is like an opening teaser clip. So we're not going to respond to it right now, but as soon as we get there, they will.
The church.
We will respond to it. Don't worry. Oh,
welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is.
I totally forgot to ask you, John. How long do you have? Like, if so, can we go for 3 hours?
I probably have at most 2 to 2.5 hours.
Okay, all right. Let's just not waste a second of it.
Cool.
Javier Perdomo. This channel is a place where I like to do theology videos, church history videos, and especially just because I feel like it's a need that we have on the YouTube sphere right now, doing apologetics, dealing with Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. And as many of you know, that's just what the channel has been focused on really since I started it earlier this year. And I've been doing a lot of interviews with people that either used to be Roman Catholic and then
See, pause. Take a look at his bookshelf, like all those fantasy books. Like he's got the Expanse books up there. He's got Wheel of Time. He's got some Sanderson books. He's got Michael J. Sullivan. I believe he even has some Star Wars books in the bottom right. I think they're new canon, though. Yuck. Okay, all right.
Oh, man.
Do you want to say something? Or?
I was going to say, he was talking about how he was wanting to respond to Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox stuff. But as you were saying earlier, isn't like every single one of his over 100 videos about Roman Catholicism? I didn't see any about Eastern Orthodoxy.
There's a couple about Orthodoxy, about like why I almost went Orthodox or something like that. There's a couple, but it's heavily Roman Catholic.
Ah, cool. Yeah, we can continue.
Okay.
Join some sort of Protestant tradition, whether that's Baptist or Presbyterian or Lutheran or Anglican. And I've done some apologetics myself as well. I've interviewed several scholars, and I have a couple of interviews coming up, or maybe I will have already posted the one I'm thinking about by the time you see this one, which is Dr. Chris Castaldo, on why it is that Protestants convert. And so I just want to put out there some good resources for everybody that'll be useful on this topic. And so our topic today will be how to deal with Roman Catholic apologetics, how to engage appropriately with them. And so I am very honored to introduce our guest, James White. How are you doing, James?
There he is.
Jimmy!
Doing pretty good.
Jimmy!
Man, I know I told you beforehand, but I have to say it for all my friends that are watching the episode. I did not expect when I started this YouTube channel earlier this year that I'd be able to have someone like you on. So I'm just greatly honored.
I hope things get better for you in the future.
No. Let's hope that.
On a personal note, before we get kicked off with our topic today, when I first started struggling with Roman Catholicism and I started trying to figure out, like, man, why has no one tackled these questions? Why is it that the pastors that I know and I'm friends with and whom I respect, they've never dealt with these? Your channel, and as much as everyone pokes fun because how often they got brought up, your debates from the 90s really helped inform me and hold me over and at a difficult time. And so I really appreciate
it was the 90s and 2000s, somewhere up in there. I forget when it was. Chris Arnson stopped doing the great debates on Long Island, but obviously he put a lot of work into arranging things and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, we had covered most of the major topics after about 10 years of that, along with the intermittent debates that we did in other locations, like the self-moderated debate in Clearwater, Florida, with Robert Sungenis on
that was a great
infallibility.
Debate. I love that debate.
There's lots of funny stories behind a lot of those debates.
I've only seen his
someone says you really need to write a book about
the Eucharist, I think.
Oh, you should watch his Papal Infallibility one with Sungenis, because he used an argument, and Sungenis thought he would use the same argument as some other apologist, or White thought he would use the same argument as some other apologist he debated, and White didn't even know what to do. He's like, the last guy I debated didn't say that. and like he was like really complaining because he didn't know what to do. And then he's like, Where has the church infallibly interpreted just coping like he always does?
Oh boy, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that
Oh,
was funny.
man.
Find that debate. That debate is fun. In fact, if I remember, I'll put that in the comments.
Yeah,
I'll find it after the debate.
I have a lot of respect for Dr. Sungenis from what I've seen. He seems like somebody who doesn't back down from things and stands by his convictions. And yeah, just a very good apologist overall.
Amazing apologist. In fact, behind me, you can't see it right now, but I've got his 3 trilogy, not by scripture alone, faith alone, etc. I got all his books on geocentrism and some of his Bible commentaries. It just such good stuff, you know. And
Oh yeah.
yeah. Ooh, apparently Javier knows about it because Paul told him. Thank you, other Paul.
Oh.
All right. Let's see. Oh, no, this is good. We want Javier to know about this. Shout out to Javier. Javier, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm bad with Spanish. All right.
All this stuff, and you know that is possible. Maybe that's something that needs to be done. But sometimes you watch the debate, you don't have any idea what went into it and what's actually going on behind the scenes too. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk on some other shows and podcasts with people. You know, with some of these people you got to have dinner with before or after the debate. Some of them you've had the opportunity to talk to a little bit, right?
Yeah, primarily with Muslims, people who've never been Christians. It's a little bit of a different situation when you're dealing either with people who claim to have once been where you are, or who are making the claims that Rome does. There's a different dynamic there, and there has to be a different.
And by the way, I'm going to say something that I've exposed James White on multiple times is his massive double standards. When he talks about, for example, if he debates a Muslim, since the Muslims can't really use our scriptures, they need to quote scholarship. So they quote these very left-wing apostate scholars like Raymond Brown. And then when Jimmy White wants to, in his debate with Peter Stravinskas, he's saying, and the Purgatory debate with Sungenis, he's quoting Raymond Brown. Well, how come Raymond Brown disagrees with your interpretation? All of a sudden, Raymond Brown is important now. And he quotes these frauds like Richard McBrien. Like, he does the exact same thing that Paul Williams, Shabir Ali, and all the other Muslim apologists do, except he's allowed to do it, you know. The Muslims aren't. Like, and look, if you want to see, that's why I'm so against quoting scholars. Like a guy whose show I've been on, Craig Trulia, he's pretty good at not doing it, but he did a response to the Unionist Initiative. It's amazing.
Yep.
No, he did a response, and he's like, "Well, Chadwick disagrees. Who cares about Chadwick? I don't care about Chadwick. He's not Catholic or Orthodox. He's some wacko. Who cares?" It's kind of like when, who was it? I lost my train of thought here. Oh, like when Sungenis, or sorry, when James White was debating Sungenis, I've got a clip about this. He's like, how? He's like, look at Philip Schaff. I'm like, who cares? That if I told White to look at St. Robert Bellarmine, is that going to carry any weight? He's like, no, he's some wacko papist. Well, why should I care about Schaff? You know, anyway.
Right.
That's
And I feel like most people even know at this point that a lot of Schaff's stuff, while it's still really good, is slightly outdated.
Slightly. I mean,
maybe I'm being nice, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's why I try to stay away from the scholars. Like getting back to Craig Trulia, like he was talks about in his book, his papacy book that just came out, when he's talking about Constantinople 879. He's like, scholarship agrees that that the Pope accepted this council. I'm like, Craig, don't do that. Just don't. Please.
Oh boy.
He's normally pretty good, but he does dabble in the scholars thing. But no, scholars.
Scholars, yeah.
Scholars.
Hey, well, if the majority of them say it, it has to be true, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like
according to
scholar infallibility, sort of.
okay, Elijah. I was going to type a response to Elijah. He said he would debate you on St. Agatha's letter. If you don't mind, find me the timestamp. I haven't seen that. But yeah, no, I did a thing with Craig on the 649 Council. I could probably do something with Pope Agatha. He's not contacted me, so yeah, just tell him to contact me, and we're good. I'd love to do some with Craig. All right. That's enough of that. All right, let's get back to our thing.
Dynamic.
Right.
Honestly, just biblically speaking, if you're talking to someone who has been excommunicated by a sound biblical church, like at my church, even though we invite people to come to the table who aren't members of our church, as long as they're baptized believers in Christ, one of the things we do ask is if you're under discipline from a like-minded church that you refrain from doing so. And so there is a theological dynamic there that isn't necessarily present in other contexts. It makes it a little bit more difficult.
Man,
so
I would
yeah.
I would not, like, that's got to be the scariest thing, to be excommunicated from a Baptist church. Not like, of all things, a Baptist church. But anyway, yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Really? Oh yeah. I mean, oh no, I've been excommunicated by James White's church. What will I ever do?
Right. Yeah, I'm not gonna dig that one, but
anyway. All right, let's go.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And maybe we'll get into some of the reason as to why that is, because our topic today, and I just mentioned here to our viewers at the beginning, is just how to deal, or rather, how to engage with Roman Catholic apologetics, and how to really, what we'll be talking about a lot is just dealing with a lot of the tactics that we see kind of play themselves out at the popular level, and that people are really just engaging with on the internet all the time, as well as. The reason I mentioned the 90s debates is I also want to hear, I'm really interested in how things have shifted since the 90s to today, or if they have shifted in some ways and not others. And so I think that'll be interesting to talk about. So my first question here, and it's one that I have touched on several times in my interviews with other people, as well as in a few of the videos I've done myself responding to some stuff, some Roman Catholic claims on the channel, is I really see a massive set of double standards at play and just so many issues with our Roman Catholic friends.
Okay, well, I can't speak for all Roman Catholics. I can only speak for myself. I don't doubt that there's a lot of bad keyboard warrior Catholics out there. I don't doubt that. Hopefully our friend Javier is engaging with some of the better apologetics out there. He might not be, but I don't know. If you take a look at the stuff I do, the stuff that William Albrecht does and Eric Ibarra does, I mean, like I try very hard to not use double standards. I mean, I might fail, but I mean, like compare this to James White. James White, with like the thing I just talked about, James White, scholars. A Muslim, he debates scholars. Oh, why are you quoting these modern liberal scholars? You know, and I don't know. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I think one of the things, and it's difficult right now because it feels kind of like a loaded thing that he's saying, because it's like, yeah, they have double standards. Okay, can you specify what that double standard is. They might go into it a little more in the video, but I don't know. I tend to think, yeah, there's some of these, random, laymen, like you were saying, keyboard warrior Catholics that, kind of like just have that one right click that they constantly do of like Luther removed 7 books from the Bible, etc., etc. Luther bad, and a little more cringe stuff like that doesn't really get into the substance of history. But on the other hand, I feel like Protestants tend to create a dilemma of like, oh, well, the church fathers weren't perfect, so therefore I don't know what to do with them. Like, I've noticed that Protestants have a tendency of either taking like what a church father said here, or even kind of like an ambiguous passage of scripture, and just saying, we can in no way interpret this because, and now some don't. This is just from my experience coming from a Reformed Baptist background. It's almost like they create a dilemma where this just won't be answered, if that makes any sense. But
Well, and like, I mean, in terms of the church fathers, there's a lot of people. In fact, I'll say this right now: the vast majority of Catholics, Protestants, or Orthodox, or Oriental Orthodox are not well versed in the fathers, including apologists. In fact, I would say that I'm not an expert on the fathers. Yes, I've read, the Apostolics and some of Augustine, and but like the only guy that I'd consider an expert on the church fathers is William Albrecht. He's literally the only one. Like it's a very well, let's be fair. It's hard to be because there's so bloody many of them. There's
right,
and like all this stuff I got back here, and that's not even all of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, it's I heard militant Thomist say this recently, how so many people misinterpret St. John Henry Newman saying to be deep into history is to cease to be Protestant. He wasn't saying that in the sense of oh, it's so obviously Catholic back then, but he was saying it as a church history is such a messy thing that we're getting into. And I think that's a much better way to look at history than how a lot of apologetics in general is done today. But
yeah, and yeah, like in some ways, I find out church history is very messy, but in some other ways, it's amazingly coherent. It's amazing with that. Perhaps we'll get into that a bit later, but let's continue with Jimmy and Javier here.
They engage with us, and so they have one set of rules for their system, one set of rules for ours, and for a lot of people, especially those that are maybe they don't like debate, or maybe they like listening to debates every once in a while, but they're not really the argument type. A lot of people don't notice these, and so what are a few of the double standards that you've seen at play throughout the years?
We go.
Well, the clearest one is the fact that they will begin with an assumption of the historicity and consistency and Catholicity of their own system, and the non-Catholicity and non-historicity of anything else, and then just refuse to apply the same standards. They'll, on the one hand, say, well, look at the early church. It was clear. It looked very clearly Catholic. And then turn around as soon as you start pressing on any of the key dogmas that have been defined by Rome just in the past couple of 100 years. And all of a sudden they just slap some Newman on it. And I'm sure you've seen that video. It's a great video.
The other Paul's famous video.
Right.
Yeah, no, I gotta admit that was a good video. Obviously, I disagree with that. Right. Okay, I am of the opinion, like, have you ever heard me use Newman? Like, how come X, Y, and Z is not the early church? Newman, yeah, again, like I never do that. I never do that. Like,
right. Well,
again, I can only speak for myself, you know.
I dislike the whole mentality of the uh, ad hominem almost of Newman. You know, you're just appealing to Newman. Um, yeah, uh, because for example, kind of what James White is talking about here is it's like Rome has bound certain dogmas. Like, I don't particularly see that as a development of doctrine issue. I see that more as Rome having the ability to bind and loose things, which goes back to, I mean, you can read that in Secunde, you know, question 11, I can't remember, Article 3, maybe, um, where he talks about how, you know, some of the church fathers believed things that went contrary to the faith. That's because they hadn't been dogmatically bound yet. And he even says, um, that that binding ability resides chiefly in the sovereign pontiff. So I think to just kind of throw this all on Newman as if he's the one that invented this idea that oh, dogmas get bound later. People aren't accountable for, you know, errors that they made in the past before the dogma was bound.
Yeah, and like we got a comment here from the other James, who's an Anglican. It's one of the most common arguments I face, and uh, again, I can only speak for myself, but unfortunately, I think of unfortunately the low hanging fruit is because there's a lot more of them. Like for example, I kind of swore off not engaging Eastern Orthodox on Twitter because frankly, like I'm not talking about a couple smart apologists, just the average Twitter people know absolutely positively nothing, and they act like they do because they watch Jay Dyer's live streams and just repeat what he says. Like there's a thing I posted about today. We're talking about Emperor Leo VI and his 3 marriages, and they just start sputtering nonsense. I'm like, cite your source, you know, and they don't cite anything. Like, here's my source. I took a screenshot of the page. Like, this
Right.
is, you know. So yeah. So like, in terms of Eastern Orthodoxy, like all these random keyboard warriors, they try to LARP as Slavic and all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
We're kind of seeing that with the whole Meletian schism thing coming up now on Twitter. I'm not sure if
Mhm.
you've been following any of that. Well, of course you
Uh,
need.
no, I didn't follow that.
Of course, like Unionist Initiative just made that video on it, but I feel like so many of them have been just, you know, right clicking the whole, oh, Rome went in schism without actually citing any primary sources to defend their claim. But
Yeah, no, like it's amazing what you'd say. You say, okay, show me a source. Well, go in Jay Dyer's Discord. I got it from his live stream. It's like, well, okay,
right.
you're not a serious
Yeah.
interlocutor.
The worst one is when they go like, "Oh, well, you should do this yourself. Like, you should have known this already." When they do that, I'm like, "Okay, you're not serious at all."
You're
But
not serious, you know. Like it frustrates me as someone, and I know the other Paul here is a Protestant I interact with. Both of us have really tried to emphasize primary sources. And so if we're debating someone and boom, here's our document, they're like, well, but Jay Dyer, you know, okay, bye.
oh,
Um,
right.
yeah. Now I don't doubt for a second that there's an army of Catholics online who may have good intentions, but probably don't know what they're doing and probably shouldn't be engaged in it. Some probably go look for trouble. Some are probably lured into it by others. But again, I can only apologize for myself and James and Javier. I am sorry if um you've encountered the worst of our kind.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should just stop the video here because James White, you know, debunked us with that whole bringing up the other Paul's meme video of flex tape. So,
Newman,
uh,
the flex tape. Oh, that's such a good video. It's really funny, and a lot of idiots argue like that. So I mean, I
Mhm.
shouldn't call them idiots. I'll call them
Special, you know.
uh, people that are zealous, but not the most precise at explaining. Dyer knows some history too, and explains on the stream that Hanoi's that Renaissance paganism came from. Yeah, well, yeah, okay, yeah. Jay Dyer is, yeah, okay. I'd be down to debate the papacy, brother. See, okay, but there's debates about okay, I'll say something. I'd fully be prepared to come and discuss this with you, but the problem is I don't want to say, is the papacy in the first 500 or 1,000 years of the church, because that's too broad a topic. Like, if you want to say, does the papacy make sense in light of the Council of Ephesus or something like that, or like, or did the papacy exist before Nicaea or something like that? Like, that's pretty specific. Like, just the papacy in general. Like, they had this debate not long ago. This Orthodox catechumen named Luigi. He seems like a nice guy, but he's swallowed Jay Dyer stuff hook, line, and sinker. And like like the debate was, is the papacy in the first 1,000 years of the church? And I'm like, we can't, like, that's too big a, like, you can't do that in one debate. You have to have like 8 debates for that. Like, anyway.
Oh yeah. When it gets down to something like that, I feel like it just becomes a polemics game when it's such a broad debate topic like that. But
Yeah. So I'm saying Father James, if you come to me and you pick a certain topic, like not the papacy, like, but a specific topic, like a thing I did with Craig Trulia on, we debated the Lateran Council 649, how much it proves Vatican I and stuff like that. Like, that's a good debate. Like, that's a good topic. We stuck to the sources. Like, both Craig and I had read the primary sources. Yeah, that okay. Do you have anything else to say, John, or are we gonna get back to the video?
oh yeah, I think we can continue.
Sweet.
As soon as you grab hold of Newman's hypothesis, you are fundamentally abandoning the historical field of battle, while having already claimed it as part of your criticism of the other side. And so I was watching some of that.
Okay, pause for a second. I know a lot of people in the chat have watched James White's debates. Can you show me a debate where James White's had, perhaps it exists, where he's debating a Catholic and James White corners him with a quote unquote historical objection, and then the Catholic goes, well, Newman, doctrinal development, ha 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 ha. Like,
Oh
like,
no,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. So if anyone in the chat knows one, just put it down. Like, debate with Jerry Matetics on the Virgin Mary 1992. Just say that, because I don't think it's happened. I think it's a caricature. If not, it's low hanging fruit. Anyway,
I'm not sure I'm going to have time today to actually queue it up, but I've got a real itch right now for the dividing line to be dealing with some of the issues regarding the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary, and especially Jerome's writing against Helvidius. Now, it's not that this. I mean, this is that was written in 383. Okay, so we're talking about stuff that goes way back, and let's be honest, for the vast majority of Catholics or Protestants, they don't know who Jerome was. Well, most more Catholics would know who Jerome was just simply because of the use of his name and the Jerome Bible commentary and stuff like that. Vast majority of Protestants don't know who Jerome was, and certainly don't know who Helvidius was, and really wonder, in light of everything going on in our society, why we should be wasting our time thinking about such things anyways. But it is really relevant to the claims of Rome, and I want to be able to play somebody, Jeff Durbin, in fact, sent me links to St. Michael's Abbey, and I hadn't seen this group before, but they're cranking out some videos, and
I'm curious, are these sedevacantists?
I don't know. I haven't heard of these people before.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. But
See, I don't even know how to describe.
what?
Oh, I was just gonna say, James White was just kind of reminding me of this. I thought I saw that he was starting to do like not like a teaching lecture series, but a sermon series at his church, debunking Catholicism. Like I had seen a clip video of that, like him actually preaching on the pulpit, and I'm like, why are you preaching a sermon on Sunday about debunking Catholicism? Like that's the most bizarre topic. Maybe maybe I was misinformed, but that's what somebody had shared.
Well, yeah, that's what White does, you know. But thankfully, James White has brought a lot of people to Catholicism through his bad arguments. In fact, I've talked to multiple people. It's amazing that they in the late '90s or early 2000s they were just swooned by White, and and in the 2000 and teens they uh they 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 they've done some research. They've listened to sober Catholic, and they're Catholic again now. Thank God, because
Yeah.
they realize that James White, his arguments were hollow and shallow, but look good on the outside, hollow on the inside. Yeah.
Yeah, I even heard, have you heard this, that in the 90s his sister converted to Catholicism?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That really took me off guard when I first heard that.
Yeah, no, like it's thought about it that, and apparently some Catholics are kind of an a-hole about it. Like, how's your sister doing? You know, like
Oh,
they, yeah, it's not an area that someone should go for. It's interesting the fact that she did, but like I don't think I'd bring that up because like
Oh
that
no,
happened
yeah.
once in a debate. I can't remember the topic of the debate, but it was between Patrick Madrid and James White, and a guy asked, "Oh, Dr. White, does your sister have the 7 apocryphal books in her book?" Like it's obviously a loaded question to just be like,
Oh boy.
and then Patrick Madrid is like, "Oh, I don't," like as soon as it was his turn to talk, he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I haven't spoke. I'll make sure to ask her next time I talk." Like he kind of joined in on that, and like it's not a place that we should go. You know, let's just deal with White's arguments or lack of arguments, and that should be the end of it.
Describe it. These guys wearing snow white uniforms, and it's just, I mean, literally, I can tell he's sort of the head of the abbey. He's like, well, and Jerome just destroyed the heretic Helvidius long ago. I can't believe that anyone would even question this. I mean, this is 2,000 years of history, and I know very few people who've actually read Jerome's refutation of Helvidius.
I've read it. That's a great piece of literature, and John Fisher 2.0 has read it as well. Have you read that one, John?
I have not. I've heard of it, but I've never personally read it. But yeah, it's really interesting because just going on with the whole, it was the perpetual virginity of Mary. Yeah. But I was reading Eusebius recently, and he even seems to make some implications to her perpetual virginity in book 2 of his ecclesiastical history. I just thought that was interesting. Like, here you have someone who possibly slightly pre-Nicene council writing about the perpetual virginity. He seems to suggest that James and Jesus were related through Joseph, but
You're talking about Eusebius?
yeah.
One of my projects this year is to reread that.
Yeah, it really took me off guard because it's pretty subtle, but I'm like, why would he just relate them through through Joseph and not Mary, but it was just a very interesting implication.
Interesting. I'll have to read that. It's a thing I reference all the time, but I've only read it front to back once. In fact, I had purchased a new translation of it. Like I got my old Penguin edition, but I translated like I got an academic press on it. I'm like, I might as well get a new translation. And so yeah, I'm going to be going through that probably in the next couple months. You know, I just need to. It's important, and I love it, and like it's a very good apologetic document because I think it helps the Catholic case. Like for example, like people like Dr. Gavin Ortlund, who said there was no singular bishop of Rome until the 2nd century. Well, Eusebius disagrees with you, you know, and he's the first church historian. And Eusebius has read Clement, he's read Ignatius, he's read all the stuff that you use to get your false opinion, which actually comes from anti-supernaturalist, quote unquote, scholars in the 19th century. The same ones
Right.
James White used, by the way.
Yeah. I forget who's the translator of the Penguin Classics Eusebius one, or did commentary on. I think it's that one. But he gives this very biased, one-sided, almost like Eusebius started helping develop that idea of the bishops and more of a church hierarchy.
Really?
But the problem is, I mean, if you're going to be appealing to people even earlier than him, like Irenaeus in Book 3, Chapter 3 of On Heresies, then I don't see how that's a really defensible position. But
well, yeah, no, but like with at the end of the day, the people who support the no Bishop of Rome till the 2nd century, at the end of the day, their only evidence, I hate to say this, is scholars. Like, that's not evidence. That's yes, I know. Yes, Ignatius doesn't address a bishop of Rome. He doesn't address a college of elders either. Maybe there was no college of elders there. No, at the end of the day, all they have are quote unquote scholars. Anyway, we got to go. We're
and hence very few people recognize that Jerome was quite open in that work. His whole intention there was to exalt virginity above the state of marriage.
Amen.
That was his whole purpose. And in arguing his position, Helvidius had quoted Tertullian, and he admitted that Tertullian did say what Helvidius said. And it's obvious that Tertullian didn't hold to things like perpetual virginity and any of the other Marian dogmas that developed later on.
Well, because, okay, well, Tertullian is not a church father. I mean, technically, Eusebius isn't either, but
right.
and neither is Origen. And the thing that White's not telling everyone was Helvidius was an Arian. Whoa! Why doesn't he tell anyone that? Or perhaps he doesn't even know. I don't know.
Right, they were the biggest defenders of, or attackers of, the perpetual virginity of Mary. I mean, I don't know. That just seems like you're kind of on the wrong side of history if you're going to be siding with him on this.
And they denied purgatory as well. So
yeah,
and they also denied the papacy. In fact, I believe I caught the other Paul once. Hey, are you there, the other Paul? I believe I caught him once quoting an Arian council in like against papal authority. Or perhaps I'm talking about someone else. Yeah, in Socrates chapter 2 book 2 chapter 15 and Sozomen book 3 chapter 8. That's where it is. You know, the Synod of Antioch. I'm talking about, Paul. Which is like, I've heard that used against papal authority. It's like they rejected the Pope's authority. It said that. I'm like, that's an Arian council. How is that supposed to work?
Yes, I've heard that argument before, and Sosaman has some really surprisingly strong papal statements in there, like because
He
of the
does.
dignity,
I've written them all down.
right? Because of the dignity of his see, which looked to the care of all, he restored Athanasius, and I forget who was the other person that he restored, but no,
He-
it's
He restored Athanasius, Paul of Constantinople, the bishops of Adrianople, Gaza, and Ancyra. I can't remember their names.
right. And what's interesting is, from what I've heard, Athanasius just basically flashed that mark of approval from Pope Saint Julius and was saying, "I have rights to this because he approved of me returning to my see."
Okay. Okay, if you want to quote Arians, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Just we all do choose what we quote. In fact, in Craig's Pope Agatho video, he quoted a monothelite to try to prove a point. I'm like, okay, it's up to you. You know, I'm not going to quote those people, but anyway, all right. So
talked about her sin and doubt and things like that. But what's interesting is Jerome never once even tries to suggest that anyone in the church before him had ever held the position that he presented. And he would have if there had been anyone he could point to. But he could not and did not even try to point to any tradition, anything before him on this issue of Mary's perpetual virginity. And so it even with.
Do you want to say something here, John?
I was wondering, did we miss really briefly something that James White said about? I heard him say something. It almost sounded like he was saying Mary's sin and doubt. That like a lot of fathers held to that. I might be wrong, but I heard him make a really brief reference to that, and it sounded like we had just started on half a sentence that was said.
Oh, no, I don't think I skipped anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to be fair. I've not read that in a long time. Again, I'm not huge into that area of the church. Like, I've studied a bit. Like, I know Socrates and Sosaman. Yeah, like, I know all the church historians. I've read their documents through and through. But, like, in terms of the fathers, yeah, St. Jerome. Well, I've read quite a bit of St. Jerome, actually, because I use his stuff to refute Gavin Ortland on the misuse of St. Jerome. Like, how he didn't believe in a monarchical episcopacy. I blew that out of the water. All right, let's get back to
when you read it, it's contradictory to how people use it, how this St. Michael's Abbey guy was using it. Because when you read it, Jerome's not saying, "Oh, this is what we've always believed from the beginning, and here's this person and that person and that person." No, there was none.
Okay, I got a question for all these people. Like, I see the argument that James White's trying to make. He's trying to say it developed over time. Why doesn't James White do this? Like I'm not saying that's a bad argument. I'm not. But why doesn't James White? And by the way, I don't think St. Jerome's talking about the history of it. He's just trying to prove it. But either way, why doesn't James White do this about Christology? Like, you know, you don't have the hypostatic, like a clear dogmatic definition of the hypostatic union until the 5th century. You may have some fathers like throw out the idea, but it's not firmly until the 5th century. The two wills of Christ is until the 7th century. In fact, it gets defined at Constantinople III. How come he's not complaining that that's late? I mean, see, the doctrines of the Virgin Mary have to be spelled out by the end of the 2nd century, or else they're totally BS. But the doctrines of Christology can take centuries on it. I mean, he talks about double standards. I think that's a bit of a double standard.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, like, if you actually read any of On the Development of Christian Dogma or Doctrine by John Henry Newman, that's a part of his whole thesis is the ante-Nicene fathers did not articulate the Trinity in a way that we would today. In fact, sometimes the way they do it seems very savage in some ways in comparison to how well we've articulated it post-Nicene, post-Constantinopolitan. That was a bit of his whole thesis. So
Yeah, because they lived in a day where there was not much to work with. You have the scriptures, of course. You have some early church writings, like he probably like take Saint Justin Martyr. He kind of frames the Trinity in some unfortunate language. But it's kind of like he didn't have a lot to go on. He didn't have like the creeds of the 4th, 5th, 6th centuries, right? You know, he was flying blind. It's not like you had, like at the Council of Nicaea, 318 bishops who knew the scripture. Okay, let's sit down and hammer this out.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the examples I was even thinking of was Irenaeus, because I remember reading a portion where he's speaking on the Holy Spirit, and he cites Proverbs 8, you know, the passage on wisdom that's often
Yep.
applied to Christ now. And keep in mind that Irenaeus is a Septuagint onlyist. He was strongly against the Hebrew texts or the Aramaic texts. So the language used in the Septuagint, though, makes it sound much more of the person in the topic. Wisdom is created, like he created me before the beginning of the world, and all of this, like very unorthodox, not unorthodox, but rudimentary language that we wouldn't be using today to talk about, you know, the Holy Spirit from eternity. He created me, sort of thing.
Yeah, like now we have the tried, tested, and true, very carefully worded hundreds of bishops' creedal statements that we have from Nicaea and later subsequent councils.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, what did I say? That Jimmy and the Muslims have more in common than we think. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So that's the whole issue with that. So I mean, see, here's something I know is if it's a Catholic doctrine, it needs to be spelled out by 120 AD. You know, unless Saint Ignatius or Clement talk about it, I'm not satisfied. Well, you know, where does he talk about the two wills of Christ, the two separate functions of the two wills, like you get in Pope Agatho's letter to the Council Constantinople III. I mean, like it yeah.
Right.
Again, the double standards.
Yeah, and maybe this is you know, a bit more on the deep side, but I've noticed that I mean, this is the same for Catholics, so I'm not going to just throw it all on Protestants, but I feel like there has been such a, like, oh, the two wills in Christ. It seems like or it doesn't seem like a big deal to us nowadays. Like, and I think I've even heard that that's what James White says. It's like that's a secondary issue, you know, that was fleshed out much later, and um, but then you hear about people like Maximus the Confessor who were tortured for their confession of the two wills in Christ. And
Well, because
how the
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why James White doesn't think it's a big deal. Because I honestly don't believe that James White has read the primary sources from that era. He hasn't read Price's account of all the minutes and all the extra documents. He has not read Conflict and Negotiation in the Early Church, where it reproduces a ton of stuff from Pope Martin, where he's talking about what's going on with all this stuff. It's tearing the empire in half, and keep in mind his empire is splintering already,
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah. So like, I don't think he's read it. He's read Schaff and what people like Schaff or some other historian, and what these people do is they give us the news headlines, and that's not bad, but if you truly want to know something, you have to read the primary sources. And I like, again, that's the period I enjoy, the 600s onward. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's an area that, like, I would like to do a lot of primary source reading, and I don't think James White has done that, because I think James White, I'd be curious how much he's read from 600 to 1300 of primary sources. I'm sure he's read, like, I think he mentioned once he read Augustine's book on the Trinity. That's a good book, by the way. And a few other things, like he's obviously read the Apostolic Fathers and probably a few other things. But but I don't. I'd be really interested if he has read any primary sources in that time, except maybe the council minutes. Well, even those I'd wonder if he read, or if he just read Schaff's summary of them.
Yeah, most likely.
He said in his debate with Sungenis on papal infallibility that Pope Agatho is the first pope to apply Luke 22:32 to the papacy, or the papal office, which is ridiculous. It was, and Sungenis called him out on that. And then I saw in his blog, he says he's talking about this issue. He's like, according to George Salmon. Well, George Salmon is quoting someone who's quoting someone who's quoting someone. No, there are. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Okay, we're gonna ignore that. Okay, yeah, no, like, it was used by, now, of course, like, popes are applying it to themselves. Like, the pope before Pope Gregory the Great, was that Pelagius II? He applied it to himself. I don't think. Now, it's true. Like, if you go to, like, pre-Nicene, I don't believe that they applied that to the papacy. They did Matthew 16.
Mm-hmm.
I can prove that. And
Pope Saint Stephen, most likely.
Yeah, Pope Stephen, but also, well, I guess Uptatus is post Stephen. But yeah, no, Pope Stephen used it. And again, I have to talk about Trulia. I like Trulia, but his take on Pope Stephen is he's essentially saying everyone's wrong but me. Like, yeah, I've had personal interaction with Greg on this. He knows I disagree with him, but you have something to say?
No, it was just that I had seen a clip of Craig Truglia talking about Pope Saint Stephen, and he does agree with a lot of those things, like that he, from an Orthodox perspective, would have overstepped his jurisdiction and stuff like that. Like, he definitely saw his authority as universal.
I don't know if he holds that anymore.
Okay. There's a video you can watch. It's between him and Father Joseph Swaden, who's the true Orthodox priest.
But that's from a while back, though.
Okay. I don't. So he must.
That's from like 3 years ago.
So he's retracted that then. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah. Well, like, I don't think he's actually made a formal retraction, but just by his new book that he came out with, it does not seem that he's like, he tries to down. Perhaps he still does, but let's be honest. Like, I really think his whole argument about that is very, very off the rail, and he knows I think that. So I mean, like he, yeah. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out his book. I mean, I've had a lot of interaction with Craig on that book, on that thing and other things. Yeah, let's get back to here.
None of that, because he knew, and in fact, they're Lightfoot, and I didn't know this. Maybe you already did. You young guys are faster than us old guys, but that's because we had to. When I first started doing my work, I had to write it on an IBM Selectric. So if you've never had to, if you ever had to do that stuff, you guys got to respect us old folks that used to use whiteout for I'm sorry.
was like the work ethic it took, to
That's right. Have you ever typed up an entire page only to realize you forgot the footnote? Now you have to just take the page, wad it up, throw it out, and start over again. That's
Wow.
that was my life. But anyway, there is evidence. Lightfoot presents evidence in his commentary on Galatians that Jerome later in his life, because remember 383 is early in Jerome's career. It's one of the first books he wrote. That Jerome later in his career seemed to have either forgotten what he had said, or maybe didn't bother to continue defending the thesis that he had presented originally, because it presents, as Lightfoot puts,
why would he have to say it again? It's out there. Okay, we talked about Craig Truly a minute ago. He came out with a book against the papacy. What? So in 10 years, unless he publishes another book against the papacy, he's not against the papacy. I don't know. Again, this is what happens when you read quote unquote scholars. They read the documents, White. Read them on the area you want to study. I'm not an early church guy. I've said 8 times the period I'm interested in. And if you want after that, you go to Ryan Grant. He's the guy to go to. But again, scholars throwing out conspiracy theories, and he's not even quoting him. I mean,
right.
It's really indefensible exegetically. It really is. It does create insuperable problems to take the position that Jerome did. So that's just one example of a popular thing where you just have this this ease with which people will say, oh well, we've believed this all along. But when you actually dig into it, you discover, oh wait a minute, you have to use one standard for a while, then drop it, and then pick it back up, and drop it and pick it back up.
Example, please.
But because it's historical stuff, they get away with it because the vast majority of their people and the vast majority of our people wouldn't know. Turn the phone to silent. Would not know. In fact, that's Jeff Durbin now. Would not have any idea how to even find what Jerome wrote. It's not a long treatise, by the way.
Very short.
Wouldn't find it, let alone put it in any kind of context, evaluate it, anything like that. So it's done real boldly in some contexts, and then much more subtly in others. But it is a constant battle to try to keep the other side using some kind of meaningful argumentation. I was listening to Trent Horn as I was driving to the location I'm at right now on a road trip. And I was listening to him talking about prayers to saints and angels and asking intercession and stuff. He had a couple quotes from me in there. And I was just struck again at how Roman Catholic apologists can just simply change their vocabulary to where on this issue, it's like, well, this text might mean this. It doesn't necessarily have to indicate this. This might be what this is. When they're dealing with these beliefs, they're just clearly unbiblical beliefs. It's just they're just cramming it onto the text. And then when they're going for another time.
So I mean, how is this different when Dr. White says, well, sure, James says we're not justified by faith alone, but I don't know. Does James White, I can't remember, does he use the, justified before men, not before God? I got his book, but I can't remember his argument for James 2. I just remember it was terrible, obviously. But you guys do that too. Okay, yes, we exegete some stuff like that, but I mean, you guys do it too,
Right. And honestly, a lot of these guys, not James White particularly, but some of the guys I'll listen to today, I don't know if you heard Ray Comfort's response to is it Catholic Truths videos against him? And he uses the whole John 3:5 means you're born of water is a natural birth or water broke sort of thing. It's such a bad argument, and but I just can't believe how much that argument is getting ground amongst people. Because that's not the first time I've heard that, and I'm sure it won't be the last time I hear that argument.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to hear what James White thinks about John 3:5, because like the early church is pretty clear on what that means. Like it's like there's probably like 15 fathers who essentially linked to water baptism. 15 that I know,
Right.
maybe more.
Right. And I mean, it began with Justin Martyr. I mean, almost
Yeah.
the earliest back that you can get to. So,
Yeah, I've had actually a Protestant, actually Ken Temple, if you regard him. He's been on this show before. On his blog, he tries to argue that it's not baptismal regeneration, but it's massive cope, massive. Like it's
actually,
just
this just made me think. I didn't watch this video, but I saw like the thumbnail for this random video. It kind of looked like it was a Living Waters knockoff, but
oh
it
boy.
was supposed to be like a discussion between this Protestant and a Church of Christ member. And if you know anything about Church of Christ, they're basically Baptists, but they do hold the baptismal regeneration. And the title of the video was like Acts 2:38 is Satan's favorite verse, Satan's favorite Bible verse, or something like that. And I'm like, that almost feels sacrilegious to say something like that about Scripture, but like at least apply more
Yeah.
context to it.
And like how come they're saying that? Because they don't have an adequate response to it. I mean,
Right. And
yeah,
of course, that's repent and be baptized, all of you, for the remission of your sins. But
yeah, no, it's night and day, and
right.
yeah.
Topic, all of a sudden they'll be going, oh no, here's this firm historical evidence, or this is exactly what this text has to say, and that from a church that could have produced a commentary on the Bible giving us the inspired interpretation of every word, but they just haven't gotten around to it yet. I don't think Francis is going to do it. Things aren't looking. We could be seeing some huge changes here.
See, at the end of the day, probably 90% of anti-Catholic apologetics now is ha ha ha, Francis did something stupid.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's just mockery. Okay, we got a bad pope. I'll give you that. But
it's not new to the church, and but the church has survived them. So
yeah, and judging fiducia supplicans showed us what the world, the majority of the Catholic world, thinks about things like Francis, like Francis's and all this modernist garbage. They're like, no, like heck, even large amounts of Western Europe are disagreeing with it. Western Europe, church isn't exactly strong there. Sure, Africa and Poland and Hungary, yeah, church is strong there, but even a lot in Western Europe are telling him no. So that just shows the mind of the global church, not just the Pope Francis and his 50 Shades of Gray Catholic cardinal.
right. And the thing is it's like we've had popes make imprudent or problematic disciplinary decisions in the past, and God has worked that out. And but there's even, I don't know, I think about like the whole Vigilius circumstance. I mean, that was an imprudent decision by Vigilius, but that worked itself out. And I think people make a mountain out of a molehill personally with that argument. But
well, Pope. Okay, here's my opinion about Pope Vigilius. It's only a good argument if you're a Protestant. If you're Eastern Orthodox, you accept Agatho's letter, which vindicates it.
right.
Yes.
But also, to go to a biblical argument, I always think about Matthew 23 verses 2 through 3, where Jesus is talking about the scribes and Pharisees, and he says that they sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, be careful to do whatever they tell you, but just don't practice what they do, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But it's this principle of Jesus says, do whatever they tell you. However, we did know that there were times that the scribes and Pharisees didn't uphold the law like they ought to. But they still had an authority, as Jesus himself seems to state, that ought to be submitted to. So I guess in some ways I see the papacy like that, or the church like that. It's something we ought to submit to. There's going to be problematic moments, but it will be protected by Christ, because the Pope sits in the seat of St. Peter. So,
Well, and like I'm so much Catholic apologetics, so much anti-Catholic apologetics, whether it's Protestant or Orthodox, is based on Pope Francis's bone-snapping stupidity. Let's be honest. But and what happens? Okay, Francis is not immortal; he's going to die. What if they elect Cardinal Erdo of Hungary? Then we got a good pope. Then all these years are out the window when you should have been making real arguments. Now you're 15 years behind. Congrats.
right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and oh man, I had something else on my mind. It was quite good. I can't remember. I just we know who's not going to get elected pope though. Cardinal Fernandez. Fernandez isn't going to get elected pope. He's like
Oh
he
man,
just ruined his reputation.
right. I feel like the scandals just get worse and worse with him. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, apparently they found more stuff about him.
I was hearing a little bit about that, but
yeah, I think they got it on Rorate Celli. Like he's a sick individual. He's mentally ill. He needs to be put in a mental hospital. That man. But oh well. They yeah, no, at the end of the day, people like White will tell the Catholic, "Hey, look at Francis. You really want that? You really think this guy is sitting in the chair of Peter?" And Catholics who don't know history are going to be like, "Oh, maybe he's right." Yeah, but at the end of the day, that's all they have.
right.
That's most of what they have, I should say.
And
Not that.
it's interesting because I was even studying anti-Pope John the 23rd recently. Not obviously, I'm not said. I'm talking about the 13th or
Yeah.
14th
Oh yeah,
century
yeah, I know that.
anti-Pope.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But when he was accused of multiple different crimes, some of them going towards absolutely horrible things, and he was convicted of them and imprisoned. I think some rich family member like bailed him out of prison, and Pope Martin V actually established him as a cardinal again, which I think just goes to show, you know, yeah, certain popes, certain leaders, they've put, you know, not the best people in positions that they shouldn't be in. But that was 700 years ago, and I think the church is still standing strong on its convictions overall. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right, back to these guys.
Francis isn't doing real well, and I honestly don't think he's gotten everything done that he wanted to get done before he goes, but he has certainly laid the foundation. And if we have a new papacy coming pretty soon, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what comes of all this stuff. It really is.
Yep.
Well, to get the climate of the global church, just look at Fiducia Supplicans. The reaction to Fiducia Supplicans. Like that just shows where the global church is at. Yes, there's an inner circle of elitists, Francis, Fernandez, Roche, you know, folks like that. But yeah, no. Again, these people aren't immortal, and like again, if this is your only argument, it's a massive appeal to emotion, and Yeah, I mean, yeah, no. I
Yeah.
suppose it does have shock value though, because I mean,
Mhm.
he is a really bad pope. Let's be honest. So
Yeah. No, I
yeah.
agree. Uh,
Anyway,
And that's one of the things then to your point, right? A lot of the time they'll say, well, this is just unanimous, the consensus of the fathers, the unanimous consensus. And then you have situations where
example,
you'll press in, what about this father? Well, he's not representative of the tradition. What about this other person? They're not
example.
representative. They're not representative. I see that even, again, I'm a super small YouTube channel, and I put a YouTube short the other day from another interview that I did. And immediately, because the church father was mentioned, not in support with Rome, the first comment is just, well, good thing we don't just stand by the church fathers. We have the magisterium. And it's like, okay, well, do you care about what the church fathers have to say or not?
Well, and it's a selectivity with any church fathers. So I mean, I remember the first time I quoted somebody to Jerry Matetics, and he just dismissed them as not being an early church father, and it's like, and that's not apostolic tradition. Well, who gets to decide? For example, when Jerome deals with Tertullian, well, he wasn't in the church because he became a Montanist. The problem is the sections that Helvidius had made reference to that we can determine. I mean, we don't have Helvidius, we don't have his side. It would have been really interesting to have his side.
Who cares? He's an Arian. Like, what's?
oh boy.
It's a shame we don't have these Arian writings. It's a shame we don't have account of the minutes of the Synod of Antioch in 340, 341, where they reject papal authority. But I don't know. I guess they like. Well, I guess when you think about it, like they're kind of like the Arians were kind of like the Protestants of those days. Working against the Catholic Church, thinking that they're right based on Scripture alone, and yeah,
right.
There's some common.
I was honestly thinking, and I'm gonna pull up like one of the most popular pop Catholic apologetic things, but I forget where it St. Augustine says it, but that passage where he's talking about the purgatorial fires, and he's saying this could either be something that the church discovers or lays aside. I forget how he puts it, but you're familiar with that passage, right?
Yeah, like is that the one in the Enchiridion?
Yes, I think that's it.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
One of the things that stands out to me, and I feel like more people don't talk about this side of it, is that Augustine is saying, basically bringing it up as a theological proposition that the church could either accept universally, or they could do away with. And I think that's what a lot of people seem to forget, and that's why I was bringing up the St. Thomas Aquinas on the topic of heresy in Secunda Secundae, because he talks about how, there have been church fathers that have made errors that we would not tolerate today, but that's because the church has the ability to bind and loose. Like, I feel like this has been addressed centuries and centuries and centuries ago, but people today are like James White are still taking it as some kind of huge dilemma in Catholicism.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of makes no sense. But like again, I don't expect these people have read that much of Augustine. Like most people. Again, most people have actually read very few of the church fathers. It's very rare someone has read a lot of them. A lot, because there's so much. Again, I'd say William Albrecht, and that might be it. Maybe one more person. Like it's a daunting task. I don't have the time for it. Like I read the medieval stuff. That's what I do, which is for better for worse. But anyway, continue here.
But the sources that we have today that say in Tertullian the things that Helvidius was referring to were long before Tertullian converted to Montanism. So he is the father of Western theology, and yet it's just like, well, We'll accept that. We won't accept the other thing. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but one of the longest articles that I wrote years and years ago, probably late 90s, in response to Catholic Answers was on Sermon 131 from Augustine, because Keating had quoted it. Rome has spoken, the case is closed.
Yep.
And when I debated Peter Stravinskas, he quoted the same thing, and I very quickly found out he had never bothered to read Sermon 131 or to know what the context was, and that's very, very common for people on that side, and it's common for people on our side to quote stuff too without knowing what the actual context was. But
yes,
anyway, there's just these examples, so many of these types of examples, where when you dig in, Augustine is not a friendly source for the current Roman Catholic system. Now they'll quote him on all sorts of other things, and they'll even misquote him from things to support stuff. And I debated a Roman Catholic attorney on Long Island. I've forgotten what his name is right now.
Well, that's that guy who writes for the Remnant, Chris Farrar. I've never actually seen that debate. Like, he's talked about it before, but I've never actually seen it. I think it was Immaculate Conception, but again, the guy you need to debate, who you haven't debated, White, is William Albrecht.
The only
it's on the list.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the only debates that I think I've seen with James White are with Father Mitch Pacwa, and
and he's a rank too.
Robert Sungenis. That's the other one. Yeah,
the Sungenis ones are good.
Yeah, I've got to watch those like all the way through one of these days.
Yeah. If you heard his debate on the Mass,
yes, that was the one that I was watching with Dr. Sungenis.
Yeah, there. I took that debate. I took all the clips when James White is quoting modern Protestant scholars to try to make a point. Have you seen that? It's on my channel. It's like 2 minutes long.
No, I don't think I have. No.
Oh man, it's brilliant. We will get around to that.
All right.
Yeah, in fact, as soon as we're done this, we're probably not going to finish today, but at the end of the next one, I'm going to pull that up, and it basically is that all he's doing, getting his information from the church, is quoting Schaff, Cunningham, Pelican, and J&D Kelly. That's all he's doing.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's like, well, how come Schaff disagrees with you? Well, because he's a heretic. That's why. How come St. Robert Bellarmine disagrees with you, Dr. White? Well, it's like, well, yeah. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of that debate, though, was when Dr. Sungenis was quoting certain passages from James White's book to him, and James White tried to make this little quip about, like, oh, I enjoy reading stuff out of my book and all this, and Robert Sungenis was like, yeah, I hope people go buy it to read all your mistakes. I loved that one little quip. I thought it was just so brutal.
Yeah, that was good. I liked that debate. That was during the cross-examination.
Right, yeah.
Oh, man, brilliant stuff.
And we debated, was that Perpetual Virginity? I think it may have been Perpetual Virginity.
I think it was.
And he produced an entire quote from Augustine that upon examination is fraudulent. Even the Roman Catholic sources recognize that Augustine never said that. And it's like, well, here we go again. The donation.
Well, Roman Catholic scholars got to take it with a grain of salt. Let's be honest,
Constantine, the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Rome loves its made-up.
Here we go.
Here we go. And unfortunately, this has seeped into Eastern Orthodoxy as well. They try to go through forgeries. But like the thing is, you can already get everything for papal infallibility by the 7th century.
Mm-hmm.
By the 7th century, you have Stephen of Dore, his letter to the Council of Lateran. You have Pope Martin's letter to John of Philadelphia. Pope Martin's letter to the patriarchates of Jerusalem and Antioch. Like, there's so much gold, and of course Pope Agatha. There's so much there that and that's all prior to these forgeries, and they're ecumenical councils too, confirmed by hundreds of bishops. So,
Right. And one of the things
nothing here.
One of the things about even the donation of Constantine, which was brought up, it wasn't like, I can't remember off the top of my head which pope that was that referenced it. But the thing is it wasn't like that pope was referencing donation of Constantine as this random thing to pull out to appeal to himself as, the supreme pontiff. That was something that many in the East believed was authentic, and they simply thought that the Pope had that authority back then.
And they tried to use it because they're like, well, if it applies to old Rome, it applies to new Rome,
Right, and Balsamon is one of the most famous examples of that. He saw it as authentic, and he lived 100 years after the schism took place. So, I mean, the East was still seeing it as authentic and as something that actually applies to the Pope. So,
well, and keep in mind that's nothing to do with that's only to do with temporal authority in Italy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's to do temporal authority in Italy, and like it's not to do with the stuff you find in Pope Agatha's letter. And again, a Protestant has an advantage here. They don't have to accept Pope Agatha's letter. In fact, a lot say, yeah, it's too late. Yeah, it does teach the papal stuff, but it's too late. Whereas an Orthodox, you can't dodge that.
Right.
In fact, I've come across so many Protestants and Oriental Orthodox who are like, boy, I wouldn't want to deal with that stuff, with Pope Leo, with the popes in the 6th century, with Pope Felix, Pope and Pope Agatha. It's like, I wouldn't want to deal with that, but
yeah, that's one of the things I have to give credit to, and I have given credit to Protestants for, is I find them a lot more consistent overall with their overall skepticism for history, because I feel like Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox they will see history and historical narratives as authoritative until it disagrees with them, and then they will have like a serious skepticism over something, such as papal supremacy.
Well, I can't speak in terms of Orientals because I've not really engaged with their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a bit of interaction with Daniel Kakish, but that was just in like group chats and stuff. But like I've not done any serious engagements with their apologetics, but I have for Eastern, and the fact that they give us 1,000 years to make our case, and Pope Agatha's letter is enough to make it alone.
Right.
So anyway, we'll continue here.
Cool.
Patristic citations, and has a long history of it too. So to go deep into history is to discover just how often Rome has messed things up. That's a sort of change in somebody else.
It's interesting how much there's a lot of projection that happens there too, right? Because we're the ones that get accused of that. Like, a Protestant could produce an entire book with quotations with proper context, explaining how they fit into our heritage and how we've used them. Well, and everything will just get hand waved away as, oh, this is out of context. But to your point, they do that too, right? And I think another thing for me that I've noticed, and it's one of the first videos I ever did on this channel, and this whole issue came up for the first time, I think, when I was watching your debates and seeing this question go unanswered. I'm curious if you've ever heard a good attempt at this response. Another thing that I've noticed as far as double standards is they'll come up with arguments that they're like, oh, if this argument works, it's going to destroy Protestantism. But what they don't realize is that if that same argument actually were sound, it would destroy their system as well, right?
Example, please.
Right.
And one of those comes from the canon, right? Oh, who gave you the canon? On what authority do you infallibly know the canon? From what your kind of famous, or I guess infamous, depending on who the viewer is, question was, well, wait a minute, what did you get the Old Testament canon?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'm curious if you've received a response on that from anybody.
Well,
see, okay, I'm just going to say here, I stay away from the canon issue, because although I think it ultimately helps our side, it's a long way to go to get there. A lot of rabbit holes to clear up, but I think it ultimately helps our side. And it's pretty easy to trap people like James White, but I don't know. He's going to say something right now, so let's hear what he says. But it's not something that I use for an attack. Like I think I've described this. My apologetics arsenal is smaller than most people's, but like I make sure my arguments are airtight.
Yeah, I
Like,
tend to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I generally avoid those canon arguments as well. I don't think most of them are generally very well thought through, and I personally haven't thought through like the perfect canon argument that completely debunks it. But I agree with you; it tends to, even if it doesn't completely debunk Protestantism, it works better on our side than theirs.
Works better on our side than theirs. Well, yeah, no, that's true. But I tend to avoid sola scriptura as well, because again, I believe we ultimately win, but there's a lot of rabbit holes there. Now, if it's brought up to me, I gotta take care of it. But like for me, again, I brought this up in the live stream. I can't remember whose it was, but if you could have 30 rubber bullets, 10 standard bullets, or 5 silver bullets. I'm going with the 5 silver bullets. That's just how I do my thing. Because I have arguments against, for example, against Protestants, that Javier and James, that they have no freaking answer for. And refutations of their quote unquote arguments that they've never heard of, and there's no way out of it. But yeah, so I don't know. I just want to say that, but let's see what White has to say.
If you're referring to the quote unquote White question, the only things that have been offered in response to that, initially, once it started floating around, I never called it that. I was sent. This was so long ago that these were on cassette tapes.
The White question is actually really easy to answer. In fact, let's just wait until if he says it again. I want to hear him say it.
I was sent a cassette tape from I think St. Joseph's Catholic Communications radio program or something. Tim Staples may have been associated with it. I don't remember, but that was the first place I heard it called the White question. And honestly, most of the responses have been things like, someone literally said they could use the Urim and the Thummim. So the breastplates, the high priest, the divine dice, is Isaiah scripture? Ho, snake eyes, that type of thing. And
yeah, I don't use that one.
And then if you say that the Jewish magisterium, that does not go well for you at all, because you can demonstrate that the Jewish magisterium never accepted the Deuterocanon.
He's relying on really outdated scholarship here. But no, again, William Albrecht has just shredded this stuff. But the thing is, we have no documents from the quote unquote Jewish magisterium. We have things from guys like Josephus who are interesting. And keep in mind, the Jews were not monolithic. So my answer to the White question is, okay, the question is, how did someone 50 years before Christ know that Chronicles was part of canon? And my answer is, they didn't. The only thing that they knew for sure about was the Torah, because that came down from Sinai. That was God speaking. And they all agreed on the Torah. But some people had different views. So when Christ is talking to he's making the arguments against the Sadducees, he's using the Torah. He's not using prophets, even though he believes in the prophets. So they had certain camps, and the only common thing they believed in is the Torah. So therefore, the church is the authority on this. That's my answer, and I don't think I don't think there's an adequate counter response to that, or except that agree with me there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and I'm sure you're familiar with the book on the Biblical Canon by Lee Martin MacDonald, but I think he does a pretty decent job at demonstrating. Like, he went through systematically each of the proof texts that are often used to argue for a defined canon of the 39 books. Um, pre-Christ, or during Jamnia, or whatever you want to say, and just showing how a lot of these just don't add up to equating the 39 book canon, and tend to be pretty ad hoc. But
yeah, no, it's a problem. It's a problem. You're in far better position to argue the 46 book canon than the 39. Far better.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, from a scripture or church history perspective. But yeah, let's keep going.
Canonical books as scripture, anyways. So, yeah, no, I really haven't gotten a good response to that. If you're going to be consistent with history, if you're going to apply the same standards to the historical context that you would otherwise, most of the time it's just a default back to I'm going to trust what the people I've learned to trust say.
Yeah, that was my argument, right, John? That was my argument.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I mean, it sounds like James White just schooled you, if you ask me. But
now, I don't doubt there's some Catholics that might say that, but that is such low hanging fruit. I'm I'm shocked that he's doing this, But
yeah.
oh well. Like again, he no longer engages Catholics in debate. His last Catholic debate was the Trent Horn in 2017. That's what, 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He like the apologetics that we have now. We got people like me, you, people like Elijah Yassi, Michael Lofton. Like, we may not agree with his pope-splaining, but he's really good at defending the doctrines. We got Eric Ibarra, who has just shredded all the garbage that James White used to use against the papacy, like the Cyprian argument that has been curb stomped. It's dead. It's dead, and it's not going to rise. We put 50 shells in its corpse. That's how bad it is.
Oh yeah. One person I want to see, and I see him in the live chat getting to apologetics more, is John Colarafi. A really smart dude, and I've learned some from him. So,
well, he's published a book. I don't own the book because I try not to buy apologetic defenses. I try to do all my own original research. I purchased Craig's book because I know people are going to be reading it, and I need to refute some of the arguments in that book. And to be honest, I'm not, like, I've read Craig's book and I'm still thoroughly Catholic. It didn't persuade me. I read Robert Spencer's book, which is an absolute joke. Yeah, like it's sad what's happened to that man. You compare Trulia's book to Spencer's book. Trulia has done way more research. Like, it sounds like Spencer has just gone to these, like, has read all the bad Protestants against the papacy, and it's sad. Anyway, he's a very sad individual, Anyway, I hope, and he got completely owned by the Muslims on the Patrick Bet David podcast. Have you seen that?
Oh, I saw it was with Jake and Daniel Hakikachu, right?
Yeah.
No, I didn't watch it all the way through.
Oh, but they ruined him and that other guy. Like,
boy.
Because he's using all these secular humanist arguments against Islam, And they're like, look, you're debating like an atheist. You're going to turn the Christian world into atheism if they follow your stuff.
Yeah, I heard stuff like that about the debate. Is it was almost emotional appeals they were making rather than really honest. What does Scripture and what else teach? But
Yeah. 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 No, yeah. No. Like, oh, yeah, the Muslims are mean to apostates, or I'm like, is that all you got? Like it's sad, and a lot of people saw that debate. That's a huge podcast, Patrick Bet David,
mhm.
the PBD podcast, and like it was. All right, let's try. I know you're strapped for time, but let's try. It's an hour and 4. Let's try to get 32 minutes in. We'll finish up the second one another time. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right.
Even if they didn't actually give a dogmatic answer to this until April of 1546, which is, of course, when that happened. But then, as you know, when you dig in at that point, what they said in 1546 is not what Hippo and Carthage said long before that.
Yes, it was.
And the honest person will go, there were two parallel perspectives on this in history.
Has he read
and
Hippo
the more
Carthage?
people knew about the Hebrew Old Testament, the Hebrew language, and the Jewish people, the less likely they were to hold the canonical status of these books.
He's been shredded on that by Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin. If you've seen the debate between Akin and White,
I think I saw a bit of it, like
yeah, it's like a talk
couple
radio
years ago.
Yeah, I think it's Hank Hanegraaff, and then he's like, and then he brought up Saint Jerome and Origen, and then he's like, no, and then he explains what position they held and about Origen, and he essentially totally refutes White, and then White had no answer. Then he's like, read this book. This is the Old Testament canon of the New Testament Church. What White needs to do is debate William Albrecht. He's the chief authority on the canon. They have a whole YouTube channel about the canon. But again, he's stuck in the 90s against these apologists. A lot of them didn't know anything because it was hard to get books on that back then. You couldn't go on Amazon and read primary sources. You couldn't interact with people like you can now. Like for example, if you go for example, I talked with Eric Ibarra. He told me what books to read. I read them all. Like, I'm so much more educated now on that stuff. And he's just stuck with his, well, the more they knew the Jews, and also, why are the Jews an authority on this?
Right.
What did the Jews think about Christ, Dr. White? That he was not the Lord and Messiah? Like, how are these even arguments?
Yeah, that's one of the things I never understood. I feel like oftentimes, like the lower church, like the ones that start getting away from magisterial Protestantism, like James White, I feel like they warrant a lot more authority for the traditions of the Jews than they do for the church.
They're Judaizers. The Puritan move. Okay, I'm curious. Have you read the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit by E. Michael Jones?
I have not. No.
Okay, he talks. He does not just talk. Contrary to popular opinion, he does not just talk about the Jews. He talks about any group that has the Jewish revolutionary spirit. At the time of the Reformation, there was a Catholic by the name of Reuchlin, huge Judaizer. But getting on, the Puritan movement was a huge Judaizing movement. It started in England, and what happened in England? They crushed it. The state, church, and secular authorities crushed it. But the Puritans also moved to America, where they had no authority of the crown to crush it. And so it just metastasized into what we see today. The churches that Javier and James White are a part of. these Judaizing movements. And I recommend you read that book. Have you ever read any books by Michael Jones, John?
I haven't, but I've been very interested in reading or watching more of E. Michael Jones content because,
Oh, it's good.
from what I've heard, he's a very respectable person. But
Oh, absolutely. And he's totally like, have you heard the stuff he says about the Protestant Reformation being a looting operation?
no, I
Yeah,
haven't.
no, that's exactly what it was. In every Protestant country, there are no exceptions to this. In every Protestant country, you had a heretic, say Martin Luther, Zwingli. Uh, in England, they didn't even have heretics, but they what happened is, they'd say the church we've had for 1,000 years is false. I'm proposing a new type of Christianity, accept mine or the old church. Now, if they accepted the new religion, that means the old faith had to become like an outlawed church, and they confiscated all the property, the monasteries, the chantries, the endowments, the guilds,
Mm.
the tons of money that had masses for the dead, the endowments. It was all stolen and used to fatten up. In every single country that went Protestant, this happened. There are no exceptions. Cromwell stole all the monasteries, all the chantry money, all the Cranmer, King Henry VIII, although he separated from the church, he still believed in masses for the dead, and he had a ton of cash saved up to pay priests to do that. And Cranmer, he waited till King Henry died and just took all that money for his own project because he didn't believe in that. And at that time, Henry was dead and couldn't do anything about it. And the current king was King Edward VI was a Protestant who agreed with him on this. So, in every country, it was a state-sponsored looting operation. In fact, I have a quote from Philip Melanchthon, who's Martin Luther's right-hand man, saying princes don't care about the old faith or the new faith. They're just using us to line their pockets. The only reason our movement survived is because the prince protected us, and he's using the movement to get cash in his pockets. It was a looting operation. It was a massive looting. Their religion is based on theft at the end of the day. It's unfortunate that I know that they don't know this, but that's what it is. In fact, there's a book by Hilaire Belloc. It's called The Crisis of Civilization. It talks about all of this. It's for loot. And yes, he admits there was corruption in the church, and that's certainly true. There was. But if it's corruption, you do something like the Gregorian reform, a real reform that actually solidified doctrine, solidified canon law, cleaned up people buying offices and stuff like that. And yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it's interesting because that's what I have been noticing that more about the Protestant Reformation being such a political stunt because
it's a looting operation.
I remember growing up watching that movie. You remember that really old 2004 movie about Luther? It paints him in like this ultra positive light and the Catholic Church in like the worst positive light or worst, most negative light possible.
Yeah, I know the
but
movie you're talking about.
It paints.
My dad's a Lutheran, and same with all of, like, my grandparents died practicing Lutherans. Like, look, I have a German last name. We're Volga Germans, a group of Germans in Russia that got ethnically cleansed at the end of World War II. It's an ugly story, but yeah, we're Lutheran. Like, I'm Catholic because of my mom. Thank God. But yeah, no, but like, I've had family friends. They gave me biographies of Martin Luther by I can't remember. They gave me the Small Catechism. I read that too. The book's called The Triumph of Truth, the biography of Martin Luther. It's by a French Calvinist, and it kind of does everything. Have you noticed in Martin Luther's biographies, it's got the 15. There's two parts that everyone talks about. And it's the first one is when he puts the thesis on the door. Ooh, you big baddie. The second one is when he's before Charles V and he does his "Here I stand."
Right.
That's all they talk about. Fast forward to his death in 1546. Well, what happens to the other 25 years? Well, it's not that glorious because he disagreed with Zwingli in 1529. I think it was 29. Yeah, and most Protestants agree with Zwingli on the Eucharist. Certainly James White and his friend Javier do. They agree with Zwingli on the Eucharist. You know, so Martin Luther, their hero, was wrong, and you know he has some writings about the Jews. That he departed from the Catholic teaching on the Jews, by the way, which is defined by popes like Pope Gregory the IX, Pope Innocent the IV, Pope Gregory the X. That kind of stuff. And no, he was a very he got married to a nun. You know, he tried to according to one source, I don't have a primary source about this, he tried to pimp a nun to the Archbishop of Mainz to get him to come to the Protestant party. I don't have a primary source on that, so there's a question mark over top of that. But he was a son of the devil at the end of the day. Yeah, and my dad's a Lutheran, you know, non-practicing Lutheran, but both my grandparents died practicing Lutheran, so they're in my family. But yeah, Martin Luther was, I hate to say it. Actually, I don't hate to say it. I love to say it. A son of the devil.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality when you start studying it more, and just the fact that he was exceptionally liberal for his day, because he was taking a whole new hermeneutic of just disregarding all of the tradition that had been passed down from generations, and looking at it from a more skeptical lens. I think it really birthed so much of what you see in the Enlightenment movement and all of that. But anyway, yeah.
Well, if you study his debate with John Eck, this is such a hilarious debate because Martin Luther was saying, because he's constantly changing his views on councils or not. He eventually ended up rejecting councils in the famous "Here I Stand" speech. But he's debating John Eck. This is so funny. He's like saying, I trust councils much more than popes. And the debate goes on, and then he's saying John Hus, the famous Bohemian heretic, who was a whack job, complete whack job. He's like, he did nothing wrong. And it's like, wait a minute, you trust councils, yet the councils condemn that guy to death. Like John Eck completely owned this heretic Martin Luther. Like it would just, that's a beautiful debate to study. And he completely trapped Martin Luther. And at that point, Martin Luther knew that there was no room in the church for him. So then he went full heretic. I mean, he was already a full heretic, but he stepped on the gas, if you want an analogy. Oh boy, do you have anything to say about that, John?
I think we should continue the video, but
okay, continue the video. We're taking too much. All right.
But all of that is somewhat smoke and mirrors, because I guess Gary Machuda, since our debate on Long Island, has now put out a book with somebody else.
Have you
trying
read it?
to bolster their side, which again, since my side says there were two parallel traditions, my side can do that. My side could say, hey, because of the
we concede that there was church fathers who were wrong about the canon, and not just the Old Testament canon, the New Testament canon as well. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, if you go through his catechetical lectures, talks about the 26 books of the New Testament. 26 books? Is that what your New Testament had? He didn't believe in the book of Revelation. Some didn't believe in 2 Peter. Like, I think Eusebius.
Yeah, he actually says, I believe that was the norm of his time, was to just see it as a like a very regarded text, but not inspired like the others.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so I mean, like, look, we have no, but a thing about the canon, and he said Carthage and Hippo were not um what did not agree with Trent. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I've read Carthage and Hippo. I've read Rome. Like he's just he's either telling a lie or has not read the sources here. They don't endorse his canon. Anyway, let's continue.
Translation of the Old Testament into Greek. All the manuscripts we have of the Greek Septuagint were produced by Christians, and they, if their extensive manuscripts contain the deuterocanonical books, there was that tradition. But even as Cardinal Jimenez said, the same Jimenez who interviewed Luther.
Cardinal Jimenez interviewed Luther? What? Is he maybe getting mixed up with Cajetan?
It could be. That would be pretty bad if that's what he's doing.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I know Cardinal Jimenez was who ironically I believe he succeeded Tomas de Torquemada as the Inquisitor General of the Inquisition, by the way. But I do believe that he said some things about those that weren't strictly. And of course, you have Erasmus, who didn't believe in them either. But I mean, yeah, we don't agree. And in fact, I think the Protestant movement, like if you get to the medieval age, it's very clear that the majority is the 46 book canon. There's a few stranglers who still believe in the 39 book. And they who still believe in the 39 book canon, and but certainly in a minority. And then there's a resurgence in that movement during the Renaissance, like with heretics like Erasmus and stuff. But the vast majority of the early church believed in the extended canon. Yes, there's yeah, we know there's some that rejected it. We know St. Thomas Aquinas did not believe in the Immaculate Conception. We know because it had not been defined. There was room for disagreement. But we know that people reject it, and the New Testament. Why doesn't James White say they didn't believe in your New Testament either? You know, because a good chunk of people in the East in the 4th and 5th centuries rejected the Apocalypse, often called Revelation. How come he doesn't bring that? Oh, because he agrees with it. It's like the Christology thing. That's allowed to develop. Anyway.
Yeah,
John?
Or if you want to go even earlier back, get to the Muratorian fragments, which are like one of the earliest listings of the canon that we have, at least some of, and that includes stuff like Wisdom of Solomon, and it even has an erroneous New Testament canon because it includes the Apocalypse of Peter in it.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. I've not read that document. Like I've heard of it, but I've never actually gone to read it.
Yeah, that's in. I think Lee Barton McDonald gives a listing of it at one point, of at least the books that are mentioned in it. Of course, it's just fragments. So
I've never read that book. I've heard Jay Dyer quote it, but I've never read that book. I've heard good things, but again, I don't like to read modern scholars on the Bible, quote unquote scholars.
Oh no, understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to waste my time. Anyway. Like I'm not saying you wasted your time when you did that, but that's not my area of I'm a medievalist, you know that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Prior to the Diet of Worms, he said, don't be like some raw scholar and be upset because there are people who cite these in scripture. They're all to be corrected by the opinion of Jerome. Well, evidently, he didn't get to make that decision at Trent. So that
I actually have quotes from Jerome where he quotes the deuterocanonical books as scripture and the extended parts of Daniel. And James White's been told about this by Jimmy Aiken, but he refuses to read anything else. Anyway.
That got all overturned. But from my side, that's not an issue. I can, and you've heard me. I would assume you've heard me say many times. I teach church history, and one of the primary things I've said from the very first class.
His church history is a joke. I'll tell you why. It's heavily based on the Reformation. In the medieval period, from 1000 to 1500, he has about 9 lectures, and 6 of them, or 3 of them, are like factors leading to the Reformation. So like 3 are like pre-Reformation ones, and then so 6 that are actually. And then he's got 6 on Martin Luther alone, 3 on John Calvin, 2 on the Anabaptist, 2 on Munster, on the whole thing with the city of Munster and the crazy Baptists. 2. He only has 1 on the 1054 schism, but 2 on this stupid city in Germany where a bunch of wackos lived. Like why? Because he doesn't care about the medieval age. Let's just skim through this till we get to the good stuff.
Right. And the thing is, the problem with James White's apologetics is I feel like you're saying, he's stuck in time, but that's a serious detriment in my opinion, because I feel like, a lot of this generation, millennials or Gen Z, are going towards wanting to study the 1054 schism. They're wanting to go, okay, what came before the Reformation? What did that look like? So I think for James White to almost like sidestep a lot of this stuff to get to post-Reformation stuff is just a really bad move on his part. But
so I've got a question that I'm trying to throw out to people. Perhaps the people in the chat can try to listen to it, because very few people know this because it's been just skimmed over. 1054 schism. What was the big issue? The main issue. I know that there was some secondary stuff, but what was the main issue in 1054? Do you know this, John? Wait, don't say. Just say yes or no.
yes.
Okay. Yes, that's true. It was the azymes, the kind of bread used in the Eucharist. And a lot of people don't know. They'll say, "Oh, the filioque. Oh, papal authority. Oh, yeah, like the beards were like secondary issues and the rings and stuff." Yeah, but if you go and read, I got Metropolitan Hilarion's books. He says, well, the big issue, they don't even bring up papal authority, and it confuses him. It's like, well, the big issue is they don't bring up the biggest issue, which was papal authority. No, it wasn't. They accepted Agatho's letter,
Mm-hmm.
But no, most people will say the filioque or papal supremacy. But no, like I've read that, and I've actually managed to locate some primary sources on that. Oh, frick, that's hard to find.
No, I feel like.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead. Yeah.
Because that place, and this something between the East and the West. I think what happened in 1054. People say, was it really 1054? Maybe it was a bit later. I think 1054 it mattered to the Latin Church more than the Greek Church, because at that point the Byzantine Empire was super powerful. I'm planning on doing a live stream on all this. A lot of the research, I am binging the primary sources on the Byzantine Empire. But there are tons of Byzantine chronicles that cover that period, 1054, that don't bring up this event, this schism event with the papal legates. And I know they're secular chronicles, but the church was intertwined. And here's the kicker. They bring up Cerularius left, right, and center. Oh, Cerularius got in a fight with the emperor about this, blah, blah, blah. But they don't bring up about his conflict with the papal legates, with Humbert. it's invisible almost. I found one reference to it in a funeral oration for Sarah Larius. It's like 2 sentences.
Mm.
That's all I found with the ton of material they have in the East. I found a lot more in the West, because keep in mind, we're big into the legal stuff, so it matters a lot more to us. But they, at that point, their empire was huge. They could just ignore us, but they couldn't do that forever, because they lost the Battle of Manzikert, an invasion from the Normans. They were fighting a 2-front war, and that's when they appealed to us Catholics for the Crusades. Anyway, I'm just blowing smoke right now. Nothing to do with what we're actually.
Class, I remember my first church history class at Grand Canyon College, or had to become a university by then. Anyways, was church history, and I have taught my students for decades now. You allow the early church writers to be the early church writers. You do not try to make them in your image. You will
look. Okay, do we do that? I just conceded that not everyone held the canon that was codified at Trent. I just like not everyone did that. I just agreed that Aquinas, he's not a church father, but after, denied the Immaculate Conception. I have no problem admitting these things. It doesn't all fit into the funnel, but he accuses us of this essentially, and I don't think it's true. You have anything to say about that, John?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that just pointing out that church fathers made mistakes and acting as if we're almost ad hocing them is kind of a dishonest tactic, because again, I think I just go back to this idea that many of the church fathers were also proposing things. Like, you can see this in many of their writings. St. Augustine being one of the most famous examples I can think of, where they're making a lot of theological propositions, and they will say, this is up for debate. The church can either accept this or reject it. So I think that that's one aspect to this that James White isn't adding here, is that the fathers knew they weren't perfect. They knew they made a lot of mistakes, and they ultimately left that up to the universal church to decide whether or not their theological propositions were correct or not. But
yeah, no, that's true, and these things were taken care of, because, like, for example, we tend to think of say, Council of Nicaea. It's like, well, that's where we got the Nicene Creed, homoousios, cum si, cum sa, right? But what you don't remember, there's like, I think it's 20 canons of Nicaea, and some of that stuff gets pretty technical. Like, does James White believe in what Canon 18 says on a Eucharist at Nicaea? Does James White believe in that?
no.
No, he doesn't. I guarantee you he doesn't. But of course, that's
I'd even question if he held to Canon 1 of Nicaea.
what's Canon 1? Help me out here.
Isn't that that you cannot be a eunuch and a clergyman?
I
I think
don't
that's
know.
I think that's the first canon of Nicaea. I might be wrong.
It might be. I mean, that's like a canon law thing, though, and
Right,
canon
right.
law is subject to change. Like, there's stuff in councils that get rejected, but again, if it's theological, faith and morals,
Right.
like for example, Saturday fasting is condemned by Trullo. I don't know if that's true or not offhand, but Trullo, there's canons of Trullo that neither Catholics or Eastern Orthodox follow anymore,
Mhm.
because canon law can change.
Right, yeah.
Doctrines have to stay the same. Doctrine never changes. Anyway,
Mhm.
let's
Yeah.
go. You cannot castrate yourself after ordained. You can be a eunuch if you're forced to and got ordained anyway. Okay. All right, let's
will
continue.
distort them. You will misrepresent them if you try to make them in your image. The problem is the Roman Catholic has to. They have to, because Rome has said this is the constant faith of the church. And so this is what you have to find. And so I submit they can't be honest in dealing with the early church fathers and let them, and on one hand, say something supportive of the Roman Catholic position. On the other hand, something that's contradictory to the Roman Catholic position. Because that happens. That's the whole point of Augustine. That's the whole reason that B.B. Warfield said the Reformation, inwardly considered, was nothing more than a victory of Augustine's doctrine of grace over Augustine's doctrine of the church.
I've never heard that before. It might be true, but I mean, if he said that, that's pretty stupid. If he said that, you know,
Yeah,
the Reformation was a looting operation. You know, that's the victory of it. You know.
Oh boy.
Oh.
But even like when I read Saint Augustine, like on grace and free will, he's clearly laying out the Catholic position.
Yes, I know. Yeah, because James White doesn't read Augustine. He reads B.B. Warfield. Like, those are the based guys, right?
Right.
I don't know who this Warfield guy is. A modern guy, some modern Calvinist, Charles Hodge, all these heretics. That's not who I study. I would rather read Augustine. Now, I've not read, like, in 2010, when I first started to get in church fathers, I had to read everything Augustine. You know, like, now I focus on that period, you know, and I binge. Like, I've read lots of Bernard of Clairvaux, and when people try to turn him into a Protestant, I just laugh, you know, because all they've, like, there was one time with there's a Protestant, I'll just say it's Gavin Ortland. He's like, oh, Bernard of Clairvaux is, oh yeah, he believed in the doctrines of grace and sola fide and all this Protestant stuff. And then I say, I show a quote. I'm like, look, this guy preached indulgences for the crusade. How does that square with Protestant views of salvation, you know? And then pretty much everyone laughed. And then 3 days later, after the tweet's gone viral, Gavin Ortland eventually sees the quote. And he's like, well, here's a quote. Then he gives the one Bernard quote that's found in all of these quote mines. And yeah, no, it's like, okay, why don't you actually read Bernard? Like, read Bernard.
Oh,
I read his stuff on the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Do you have something to say, John? Sorry, I'm taking most of the time. I feel bad.
Oh no, you're good. This it's been good so far, so
Well, keep in mind, we're talking with two Baptists who reject Catholic baptism, but I think they'd reject Anglican or all forms of infant baptism anyway. Depends on which Protestant and depends on which form of indulgence. Anyway, yeah, let's continue. I'm curious, how are you for time right now?
I could probably do 15, 20 more minutes.
All right, so it's 8:22 here. It's a bit later where you are. Okay, let's go for 8:40. All right.
So I admit that. I recognize Donatist controversy.
So do we.
Created a certain ecclesiology for Augustine, and then the Pelagian controversy comes along, and as a result, there are inconsistencies in Augustine's theology.
No, there isn't.
And we should learn from that. If someone as smart as Augustine could have inconsistencies, guess.
I don't think White came to read all of Augustine and then came to this. He's just repeating what he read from Warfield or some other heretic.
Oh yeah. No, that's what that was actually one of the things that really stood out to me when deciphering like, you know, Catholicism over Protestantism, was actually reading some of Augustine's work and realizing, wow, like, how do Protestants square this away? And like, I could see how some do, but I'm like,
I'll tell you
personal experience. Why is that?
I'll tell you why. Because they don't read Augustine. They read Institutes of the Christian Religion, which has a ton of Augustine quotes, but it's all manipulated. They don't actually read Augustine. And again, very few people read Augustine, like or the church fathers in general. I'm not picking on the Protestants here, but I'm just saying that's why they're under that impression that he's so proto-Protestant, is because of the Institutes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
have you got anything else on that?
No, I think we can continue.
All right.
Guess what? We might too. But the Roman Catholic doesn't have that option. That's not in the
No.
realm of going, oh yeah, sure. Augustine clearly told the Pope to stick his head in the sand and made Rome reverse its decisions about Pelagius. And yeah, the North African bishops basically told Rome to pound sand, just like they had under Cyprian.
Oh boy.
Oh, this is painful to listen to. Oh my frick. You can tell he's relying on modern liberals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because Augustine was doing everything to defend the Pope. Like, I've not read Eric Ibarra's book, but apparently he comments on this.
Yeah.
But
he
John, you can take this one. Oh.
Well, I just wanted to briefly bring up what he was talking about with Cyprian, because most people will appeal to the whole passage at the Council of Carthage where they're talking about none of us sets ourselves up as a bishop of bishops or with tyrannical terror, however the quote goes on, and they try to apply that to the Pope. And actually, Bellarmine has a great section on that where he was like, from anybody's ecclesiology, taking this the way that the magisterial Protestants have taken it just doesn't make sense, because at a certain point, certain bishops do judge other bishops, and even Cyprian himself requests that Pope St. Stephen judge, I forget which bishop it was, but there's a citation in it in book 2 of On the Roman Pontiff, and Ryan Grant leaves us with a little footnote on there. But yeah, Cyprian even demands that, or requests that Pope St. Stephen judge a bishop. So I feel like people just take these passages out of context and they're not seeing the bigger picture. They just hear this one quote that's like, boom, this completely destroys papalism. And then they don't even see what the saint went on to say in their writings that completely vindicates papalism.
Yeah, and like, for example, a lot of us like to friendlishly mock James White and say his stuff is outdated. And one of the reasons is St. Robert Bellarmine, a lot of his stuff is getting translated into English for the first time ever, really. Like, there's some English stuff in Bellarmine, but the Controversies is getting published in English now, thanks to Ryan Grant's translations, who I just had on, by the way. Everyone wants that, for the first time since forever. And because English is not like a Catholic language, there's no, like, since the Reformation, most English speakers have been Protestant, except Ireland, I guess, but yeah, so it's that's why stuff's mainly in Latin. There's a lot in French. I have a lot of French books that are still in French. I got my French catechism over here. Where is it? Anyway, oh, there it is. Le Catechisme. I'm Canadian, right? So, all right, let's continue. But no, that's certainly true. So, James White, if he wants to be this expert in the Catholic Church, he needs to go and read that stuff, and like, he's read Catholic stuff before, but like that's some of our best stuff. Doctor of the Church, Robert Bellarmine. But no, thanks for that, John. That was good.
Yeah.
You can go, yeah, there's all of that's right there. They can't really do that. They have to find some excuse for some sub-apostolic understanding of this, that, or the other thing to find some way around around this. And let's keep another
that's
thing
what we
in
do.
mind. I know you're not getting much talking in here, but I could have warned you that would be the case. Let's keep something else in mind. There is a huge chasm between Roman Catholic apologetics and Roman Catholic scholarship.
Yep.
Who's using double standards now? Look, Dr. White, do modern Protestants at Fuller Theological Seminary, where you went, do they believe in biblical inerrancy? No, you do as the apologist, but your quote unquote scholars don't.
Oh boy.
You see, this is the double standards we talk about. Like you and I don't doubt some Catholics use double standards. I try to avoid it myself, but this is all your scholars think your arguments are garbage. That's exactly what the Muslims do. His new name instead of James White should be Paul Williams. Paul Williams.
Oh boy.
You know who that is, right, John?
Yes, I actually happened to watch some of his debate with Jay Dyer, and I will admit Jay Dyer actually did a very good job in the debate.
He did.
Because Paul Williams just completely quote mined a bunch of random scholars, just basically pulled up all of the Oxford education that he had in that debate,
Oh,
and it
this
was pretty
esteemed tome.
right. It was cringe. Oh boy.
It was cringe. But this is what White is doing. Your scholars think your own religion's a joke. Well, which St. Robert Bellarmine's a scholar. Why isn't he our scholar? No, you're thinking of these clowns at Boston College. And I know what he's going to say. He's like, why doesn't the Pope discipline them? I bet that's coming. Watch.
The members of the Papal Biblical Commission, for example, none of whom, as far as I can tell, believe Matthew wrote Matthew, by the way.
Well, then why do you trust them? Why do you trust them?
They wouldn't be doing debates because they don't think that's worthwhile. Obviously, Francis doesn't think it's worthwhile. That's sheep stealing and proselytization, and we know what he's said about all that over the past 10 years. But Roman Catholic scholarship is way to the left of every Roman Catholic apologist that I know. And that's why I was so surprised when last year, Trent Horn, I think it was last year, it may have been earlier this year, but I think it was last year, pulled the citation of the relatively new and very unvetted book, offering a novel and certainly not historical understanding of what theopneustos means at 2 Timothy 3:16-17 in a debate with Gavin Ortlund. Because the source he's quoting is not only, again, ahistorical, outside the mainstream of even Roman Catholic lexicography and scholarship, but the guy who writes it doesn't believe Paul wrote 2 Timothy. So I'm sitting here going, look.
And Trent Horn should know better. I mean, if he did that, I didn't see this debate, but it sounds like something Trent would do, because Trent, he tries to be traditional, but tries to got that.
Sometimes Trent is really hit or miss to me. Like sometimes he just hits the head or the nail right on the head, and other times he like when he said that absolutely no Catholic should be defending young Earth creationism publicly or something like that. I was like, oh, good grief! But
oh yeah, and the debate that Aiken had with the Byzantine Scotus. Yeah, it's just so condescending. Now Trent Horn has his moments, and so does Jimmy Aiken. But they have issues too. Here, we got a couple minutes left. Let's try to get some more.
Cool.
Look, I've debated Sola Scriptura with Jerry Matitix.
Oh, here we go.
Back when Jerry was still the the love child of Catholic Answers. They don't want to be reminded of that. But I still have the old This Rock magazines. In fact, I need to dig this one out. I think I scanned it once, so I need to track it down. I have posted it, so I want to track it down. But the picture of Jerry sitting on, sort of, I don't know, he's in a nice suit, and he's in the background sort of blurry, but you can tell it's like a church, and he's sitting there, and the caption is, "I'm the man that took your loved ones from the Roman Catholic Church," and I remember challenging him. I wrote to him and said, Jerry, could you send me anything you wrote as a Protestant, any tracts, any books, anything against Roman Catholicism, where you were leading people out of Roman Catholicism?
Unless you were a professional apologist.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is no, because I think Jerry Matitix was part of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. That's a very anti-Catholic branch of the Presbyterians. They're very
right. Yeah, it was started by J. Gresham Machen, who was one of the fathers of the fundamentalist movement. So
yeah, and very anti-Catholic too. And
yeah,
it's like the fact that most OPC people, apart from being huge heretics, are very anti-Catholic. All right, let's try to finish a couple more minutes.
You were writing tracts, you were doing debates, you were anything you recorded, anything like that. He would never ever respond. Now, let's be honest, that's part of you could make the good excuse that that's Jerry, because Jerry is the single most disorganized human being that has ever walked the planet. Okay, I mean, here's one of the background stories from the debates when he and I did that marathon debate in Denver in '93 when the Pope was in town. The second night we were at a Presbyterian church. We did the historical stuff, and after it's all over, Rich Pierce and I are standing up on the stage, and all of my stuff. I've got 2 book bags, the sort of metal type book bags that you can put your books in, and like an Uber Jehovah's Witness, okay, something like that. And all my stuff is sitting on the end of my 6-foot table in 2 bags. The chair is pushed in, and Jerry comes walking in from the foyer where he's been talking to people, and he walks up to his table, and Rich and I are just sort of looking at his table, because honestly, there was not an open square inch on the top of his table. There were pieces of paper, there were books laid open on top of this thing. There was no visible part of the wood on the top of his table. And then under his table, the only place where you could see the carpet was where his feet had been. Okay. So it is a disaster area. And he walks up and he sees us sort of standing there rather bemused, staring at his table. And he looks at his table, he looks over at mine, he says, "Well, okay, you win the organization debate." And the fact is, he was ABD. He was all but dissertation at Westminster, but he couldn't get it done. He could not finish his dissertation. Because
that's probably a good thing, because academia tends to ruin you. Like most people I know who are academics, I mean, most of them don't have faith. If they do have any faith, it's super compromised. So maybe it's a good thing he didn't get Scott Hahn is a doctorate, and he's obviously brilliant. But again, they're the exception, not the norm. The smartest people are just the people with the 1 degree. I got my bachelor degree in engineering. There we go.
Oh yeah. As long as you have a passion for, I feel like, one topic, just go study it. You don't need academia to go study anymore. The topics that you're interested in, such as church history. But
yeah, because there's so much good stuff, and you can actually study what you want instead of trying to find a prof somewhere on some corner of this globe that'll take you on as his student. All right, it's 8:38 here. I think this wraps it up. We're right at the 30-minute mark too. So, are you interested in coming back to finish this, John?
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Yeah, this is no, this is we'll just stop sharing that there. And yeah, no, I've had a great time.
Oh
And
yeah, I really enjoyed it.
like I made sure not to we're getting some good, like I made sure not to how should I say it? Not to watch most of it, but as you can see, it's typical White. He's not coming up with anything new. He just repeats the same stuff over and over again. I've heard that story with Jerry Matetics and all the papers everywhere, and um, like I'm not saying that's a bad story or he's incorrect there, but no, James White. To summarize him is there's nothing new under the sun.
Oh, he did actually up his apologetic strategy though.
Oh,
He included the other Paul flex tape meme. So no.
oh. Yeah. Well, yeah, but in all fairness, he always has referred to Newman, and he kind of condescendingly is like, "Oh yeah, their faith is all Newman, and they're abandoning history when they use Newman." He's played the Newman card a lot. Then now that the flex tape thing is up, yeah, he's made reference to it. And I got to admit, that was funny. The flex tape thing was funny. The other Paul.
Oh, it was, yeah.
But again, that's only attacking the low-hanging fruit. I remember watching that thing. He was like, auricular confession, late development. I'm like, no, it isn't. It's apostolic.
Uh-huh. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, for sure, you know. But anyway, it looks like we had a good stream, and Father James missed most of it. But we will come back. We'll come back in. I don't know. You want to come back next week or?
Yeah, we can plan on that if you wanted to.
Yeah, we'll talk. We had a high viewership here, so I'm happy about that. That means we'll probably have a high viewership second. Pray for Javier. He's probably an ex-Catholic, but pray that he comes back. I can tell he's young. He's interested in this stuff. And if you're watching this, Javier, just come contact me. I'd love to talk to you. If anything, we'll discuss fantasy novels because I know you have a lot of fantasy novels. Like you got the Ryrie Revelations here by Michael J. Sullivan, The Theft of Swords, amazing book. Anyway, but yeah, well, I hope he reaches out to me. I pray he becomes an Anglo-Catholic. Well, he had you on his show. Yeah, no, I noticed in that, Father James, you kind of took a shot at James White. It's like, yeah, I went to my top Baptist authority, James White, to try to out-talk me about Ignatius, and it was pretty bad, you know. You know, nothing new under the sun. All right, well, I will kill the stream. Do you have any last words for our audience, John?
Don't be a James White. That's my lesson for today. Learn new things.
Amen. All right, guys, I will see you. Until then, make sure you say your prayers, pray the rosary, read the scripture, and just love Jesus as much as you can.